When you launch these bigger campaigns, how do you communicate the long-term value of these initiatives to the rest of leadership and secure buy-in across the organization?
There are so many great brand channels out there, thankfully, that are measurable. So, my advice is to build confidence in the organization by starting with those brand channels that are measurable at the earliest onset.
Flash sales or loyalty programs?
Loyalty programs. You want to be able to nurture those relationships, give them the ability to come back more frequently. And a loyalty program is a great way to do that.
Hi, and welcome to Growth Talks, where we dive deep into the world of growth and marketing with industry leaders. I'm Krystina Rubino, the General Manager of the offline practice of Right Side Up, and your host. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Sarah Crockett, the Chief Marketing Officer at footwear retailer DSW. With nearly 2 decades of experience, Sarah has a remarkable track record across global strategy development, brand management, and performance marketing for iconic brands. Before DSW, she held CMO roles at Nature's Sunshine, Dickies, Backcountry.com, and Burton. She's also worked with some of the most well-known brands in the world, including Lucky Brand Jeans, Von Dutch, and Vans. In this episode, we'll discuss her approach to evolving brands with deep histories, the importance of staying obsessed with your customers, and how to authentically embed your brand into culture. So without further ado, welcome, Sarah. So stoked to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for that great introduction.
It was easy because since you're starting marketing, you've worked with so many household name clothing brands, including a ton that I'm obsessed with. So Lucky Jeans, Vans, REI, Burton, Dickies, just to name drop a couple. But when you're working with brands that are steeped in so much history, how do you balance that history with transforming them in your own way and putting your stamp on it and implying your vision?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to oversimplify it, but maybe oversimplifying it is the way to get there. Honestly, I think it all comes down to doing a deep dive into who you are. I always think of brands as humans. And so what your reason for existing is going to be different than the person sitting next to you, than the person sitting next to them. The same is true for brands, in my opinion. So it's actually, when I come into a business, I don't even think about the mark that I want to make necessarily. Eventually, that certainly comes with time where you're like, well, what, if I want to leave this place better than I found it, what does that mean, right? You do get intentional about it. But really, when it comes to transformation, it's understanding who you are at the core. Because if you understand who you are at the core, then when the tides of culture move around you, which if anything, this world has told us that's the only constant to expect, then you can understand how your role exists in tomorrow, exists in the next day, and exists in the day after that. It's going to change, but you are who you are at the end of the day. And so how you behave in a situation of stress or a situation of innovation and creativity, it's all going to be somewhat grounded in who you are as a brand and what your role is. If you lose sight of that, that's when you start to see some of those missteps that we can all have in the back of our mind from brands of recent past where it's like, wait, they did what? That feels weird. Why'd they do that? Or that feels so like they're chasing something that's not theirs to be had. And that's never going to necessarily lead to the results that you want. I don't mean to say that as if you can't be controversial in your actions. I also tend to think that the best brands are for some and not for others. So you certainly have to straddle that line. But when it just doesn't feel authentic to who you are as a brand, that's when I think brands have misstepped. And that's when they've been guided by a different compass.
Yeah, it's really insightful because to even think about a brand as a person, then to think about the kind of people that we all want to have in our inner circle in our lives. With authenticity comes trust. And there is that element of like, you can just tell when, let's just say, a friend of yours that you're really familiar with, you've known them for a long time, is doing something completely out of character. You're like, okay, girly, like, are you okay? What is going on?
Yes.
What is happening with you? Also, like, Mr. Brand, why, or Mrs. Brand, why are you in the DMs and like the comment section of this completely unrelated thing that you have nothing to do with? Like, it's a needle scratch.
That's so well said. I completely agree with that in a very strong way. I think there's something that people relate to in brands that goes back to, again, being human, where if your friend is somewhat predictable, right? You know they're going to show up for you this way or that way. And you know that this other friend's probably not. So there's something predictable in that too, right? That predictability is a big factor in brands. You have to maintain that sense of who you are to a level of predictableness that genuinely shows that this is who you are at the core. It does not matter what the next trend is. You're always going to be here for this reason. And that allows you to then interpret culture, interpret change, interpret trends through your own voice, your own position in the universe. And that's where you can maintain your distinction and your uniqueness while also being relevant.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one thread through your career, as myself and the producers that I work with were kind of pulling from your experiences to ask you questions. There's been this thread of embedding marketing with culture. So, like Dickies collaboration with Supreme, which chef's kiss, the Backcountry campaign with Shaun White. Did you feel that there was a risk of not connecting with consumers or coming off as too salesy? Like, how do you approach initiatives that are like very clearly a campaign, right? How do you approach them to make sure they still feel authentic when you're bringing another brand in, even, or at DSW, I think about the fact that you guys work with so many brands. How do you balance that?
It goes back to what I just talked about as far as knowing who you are. I will say equally important as knowing who you are is paying attention to culture. That is the environment you're surrounded by. So there's plenty of good examples of both when brands have done that and felt it missed because, again, it just didn't pay honest respect to who they were as a brand. It was too far of a stretch. Or even in the execution, maybe the idea was great. The execution, you almost saw the contract terms like written on the actual execution. You're like, oh, okay, well, they clearly didn't have rights to that or this. But then there are moments where even as a marketer, I get surprised. And that's actually at the time where I'm like, I really perk up. And I'll give you an example. When I was at Dickies, we did a great partnership with Sydney Sweeney and Ford. And this came to us through Ford and Sydney Sweeney. Literally, it landed in my inbox. And I'm like, oh, immediately just passed on it. I'm like, no, I don't need to do it. We're a workwear brand. A celebrity partnership is not necessarily authentic to who we are. And then I thankfully had somebody introduce a different side of Sydney Sweeney that I didn't even know of as just a regular consumer of the entertainment industry. And that is she has had a remarkable level of experience in past and vehicle restoration. And she started her own TikTok channel called Sid's Garage, which she started for her family to document the restoration she was doing. I think it was on maybe a Ford Bronco or a Mustang. And she's actually doing the work in the garage herself, in Dickies herself, which is why they pursued us as a brand when I was at Dickies for this partnership. And they wanted to launch a whole collection for women's mechanics and in the garage to show that you can be a woman in the garage and also express yourself in a way that's not just forcing you to kind of just wear the tried and true, which were built for men, because that's a very male dominated field. But she could be herself and she could wear things she liked and she could be protected and she could do the job that she was trying to do. And I'm like, that is badass. And that is where it comes back to Dickies was a workwear brand, always has been a workwear brand. And so to partner with somebody through that capacity who happens to be this huge celebrity blowing up at the same time, that was culture meeting the brand in its core. And that felt very right. And it ended up being very successful. They ended up doing 2 different iterations of it.
That's awesome. I love that you passed at first, but it shows intentionality. Like it shows that you were so committed to the vision of it that it was like, okay, we might pass on an opportunity that could have been, if it was your run of the mill celebrity endorsement, it could have worked, right? Like it could have done some things. It could have exposed your brand to other consumers that maybe were not as familiar with Dickies and whatever, but it wouldn't check all of the other boxes that you were responsible for checking. I would imagine is what also leads to longevity. So one of my colleagues forced me to ask you this question. You had an iconic role as the director of marketing and PR for Von Dutch in 2006 and 2007. And like, if there was an Au Courant brand at that very moment in time, and I'm allowed to weigh in on this as an elder millennial myself, everywhere you looked, you saw Von Dutch. And how did did it take on a mind of its own to the degree that even now, like, I don't know if you're aware that Charlie XCX song has a song that came out this summer entitled Von Dutch.
It keeps trying.
It's kind of a moment of like when something is just such a fit for the moment. Like, did you have any idea that Von Dutch would be such a, like, was that engineered? Was it a bit of happy accident circumstance? And you were just like, oh no, we're going to ride this because it feels right. Like,
I mean, that was the time. I will say, I think it was more of had a mind of its own. I will also say, to give the business credit, because credit is certainly due to them, it was the ultimate example of the power of product seeding. And frankly, it was the influencer marketing brand before influencer marketing was a thing. This is really pre-social media, right? Like, I mean, or at the very, very very, I think, MySpace.
It was the Facebook still, and it was MySpace and
Yes.
Top 8 and all of the things. Yep.
So your influencer marketing just wasn't really a thing. But what Von Dutch did was they leaned into celebrity. And so that's where you saw every celebrity who frankly rose their hand or walked into the door would walk out with buckets of trucker hats, right? And then the t-shirt and then the whatever else. I think this might be a fair fact that we were giving away more product than we were selling. Like it was a very, very significant investment in influencer marketing before it was influencer marketing. And that really worked incredibly well as it did become very iconic in that time of the early 2000s. The thing I will say that it's also a great cautionary tale for is how to keep the heat behind a brand when it's really rooted in like one silhouette or doesn't have that meaning. And I think as a marketer, I was actually doing more work to hide the story of the brand and to just make it about the logo than it was about exposing the story of the brand and really making it more than a logo. Because there's some dark things of the past of the brand and the founder and all those things that ultimately are out there for people to do their own research on. But it wasn't part of who the brand was. It was really a trend and a logo and a silhouette. That can only last so long. We don't really talk about the cronut anymore, right? Like that was a thing.
It was a thing. There were lines. It was if you were in New York during that time, it was like you couldn't escape it.
You couldn't escape it. And then now you can probably get a cronut on every corner in New York that you want. I'm excited to watch what Stanley does with the innovation beyond the cup. I have some great friends who work there and I have a ton of confidence, but that's another example. You have this hockey stick growth through trend and virality, essentially. How do you sustain that and be honest with yourself? If it's not a matter of sustaining that, then where do you want to take yourself after that? And being very thoughtful. And that was where I think ultimately Von Dutch had their moment and it became a moment versus an icon. And I think that's ultimately where the difference lies.
If marketers are doing their job, a brand that has enough global reach or even domestic reach, but frankly, like global reach, relevance, etc., it'll have its moment. The other thing is those moments are now so fleeting, right? Like it is kind of wild to think about how fast things come up in our radar as culture. Like even just like trends from this summer. And I'm like, if you think I'm not using them, you are sorely mistaken. But like rat, very demure, very mindful, very cutesy, all of these trends that like pop up, come and go. If a brand came out right now and was like, we're very demure and very mindful, you'd be like, oh, pat. Okay.
Yeah, I see what you're doing there.
I see what you're doing there. You did it. You absolutely. And then you had to go through the layers of approval and all of those things to be able to talk about it. So like, I guess my question's two-part. How do you actually drift onto the tailwinds when they're happening, right? And how do you do it in a way that, I would imagine it's going to be easier to an extent for an apparel brand versus like a financial brand. But how do you do it in a way that feels current and timely? And is there a point at which you're just like, okay, that trend, like it's like surfing, like I was coming up on the wave, I didn't take the wave, I got to let this wave pass and go for the next one?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways I would say. First, you don't have to do everything and nobody expects you to do everything. I think that's where, again, maybe a theme in this conversation, if you know your place in the world, what are the things that you would have a proactive voice in and what are the things that you wouldn't? That's one thing I will say. The other piece is you have to be agile. And this, I give all the credit to my teams. 100% of the credit goes to my teams because they know, and this is where fostering culture and building that within your team goes so far. If the teams feel empowered to see something and act or throw their hand up and say, we should be in this conversation and are comfortable doing that, you're going to be in so much better of a position. If I have to be the one person whose eyes are out monitoring the entire cultural landscape and coming up with all the thoughts and the ideas and the actions, good luck. Like A, that's way too stressful. B, I would be the wrong person to hire for that job. You would probably want to hire somebody who's 17 or 24 and spends 20% of their hours between 9 and 10 a.m. on their cell phone, right? And I can't do that. So I think there's a combination of just empowering your team to read and react and to recognize you don't have to have a voice in everything. So those things that you do want to have a voice in can carry further out. And maybe the last point, it doesn't have to to exist across every single channel. So if you're wanting to raise your hand and say, I want to be in this demure and cutesy conversation. Okay, let's flip the homepage. Let's turn the windows in our stores around. Let's do an email, do a CTV ad, do a podcast ad. That's going to take an eternity. Sometimes it just starts by putting up a really great social post organically. And then that carries the conversation and you can build off of it. And that gives you the time and the strike while it's hot, and then gives you the opportunity to build on it.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. It's funny because we used to talk about things, years ago, as like matching luggage for a brand, right? And it's like it can be coordinating, but not matching.
Yes.
At this point. And the other part of it is like you've worked with a lot of brands that have appealed to different generations. So frankly, from baby boomers to Gen X, so then, to millennial, to Gen Z, to Gen Alpha, to Gen whatever. It literally at this point, I'm like, are we just going to like coin a new generation every couple of years? How are we going to do this? But the interesting thing about it is like, how do you tailor marketing strategies to speak to these unique audiences? And do you see generational preferences shaping the future of marketing?
Well, DSW is a really good example of this because we have such a wide range of multiple generations of customers.
Do you wear shoes?
Yeah, do you wear shoes? Exactly.
Cool.
So if you do, we got them for you, right? So it goes back to understanding, I'll describe it as like qualitative connections with the customer. I told you I wouldn't use marketing lingo, so I'll expand on that. But it's more of a mindset, right? So to take the demographics away from it, there's a certain mindset that actually crosses over generations that I try to find and understand, because frankly, that allows me to create more relevant messages for them. So we know the DSW consumer, regardless of age. They're looking for ways to express themselves. They're also seeking value. And don't confuse value for just a low price discount. Rather, it's really the ability to get the most with their dollar. So they can buy Balenciaga shoes at DSW. They can buy Adidas court shoes in every color you could possibly imagine. The most gorgeous, feminine, demure, cutesy footwear from Jessica Simpson brand. So we really have it all. The over-the-knee boot trend that Taylor Swift sort of kicked off the season. So no sacrifice, just access. That's what you get at DSW. And this connects all generations, regardless of age. And so that mindset that connects the generations is what I try to really tap into.
Yeah, I love that, because you also just reminded me that I have a pair of amazing Nicole Miller heels inside that I got at DSW literally 12 years ago.
Yep.
I had a heel broke. I don't know why you're making me think of the story, but I had a heel break and I was like, crap, I have a meeting. I don't know what to do. I like literally took my crappy shoes from my desk drawer, whisked myself across the street to the DSW on 34th Street and 7th in Manhattan, and bought a pair of amazing shoes. They were maybe $140. I still wear them like 3 or 4 times a year. And it's to your point, it's like, are they the cheapest pair of shoes that I own? Absolutely not. But are they one of the best? It's interesting because cost per wear,
yes,
is what I kind of equate.
I take $10 off every time I wear something. That's how I mentally pay for it.
I love that for you. Wait a second, guys.
You.
We could talk about marketing, but like,
that's how I justify my purchases. I'm like, all right, take $10 off every time I use it. Will I pay it off within a year or 2 or 6, depending on what we're talking about?
That is, first of all, like, forget girl math. That is like the greatest example. Okay, I'm like shook right now. We can get back to marketing, but that is incredible because it really is. There's so many things that you've bought where you're like, I bought a pair of flip-flops, but I wore them twice and I'm never going to wear them again, versus this gorgeous pair of like really well-made loafers that I'll be able to pack and wear at every conference that I'll walk at.
Right.
Okay. Well, work related. We're going to do it. No, that is a game changer. But it is, to your point, actually, I think this ties into where you clearly know the DSW customer. I'll use DSW because it's your current example of where you're working and what you're the most connected to at this very moment in terms of customers. But you've spoken a lot about the importance of staying customer obsessed. Could you share an example of how you've used customer insights to drive a major marketing shift, either at DSW or in current recent roles or anything like that?
Yeah, a couple of examples come to mind with DSW. First and foremost, so our name, DSW, stands for Designer Shoe Warehouse. And so we have built this reputation over multiple decades of being the place to go for exactly exactly what you needed when you were going to our 34th Street location, dress shoes, right? So then we started to see and hear from our consumers through their searches on the site or through our regular quarterly brand equity surveys that we do, and or through our data that we get access through our ad partners. And this was over the recent months and years, frankly, that the athletic and casual trend was not just a trend. In fact, it's staying. So we needed to beef up our assortment, because when women were coming to DSW for a typical, whether it was like a black pump or a wedge or something of that nature for office and work needs, that is actually changing in real time to a great cute sneaker and a court shoe. And she's wearing it with her dress or her suit. And so that need is shifting. The reason why we saw that was obviously you can see it through just general culture and paying attention to what people are wearing. But we also started to see it through our data. So investing in a major strategic shift in our assortment in favor of beefing up and getting the best brands, which we do. We have the New Balances, we have Skechers, we have Nike, we have Adidas, we have all the greatest athletic brands assorted for our customer now, which was rooted in them asking for it, which is data. We also, another recent example, if you would have looked at DSW a year ago at this very moment, we would be the house of boots because it's fall. And again, dress shoes, right? That being the key to who we've been and always have had a role in our customers' lives for. So now this year, we're actually transitioning that from a house of boots to a fall trend house, because we saw the footwear trends during this period of time taking on a very large variety. So you definitely have the boot, you have the knee-high boot, you have the slouch boot, you have the moto boot, but you also have the ballet flats and the Mary Janes and a whole array of sneakers that go along with that too. And we have the best trending styles and brands available. So why pigeonhole ourselves to one category? And we, again, get this from data, seeing how our customers are coming to us, what they're asking us for. And we do weekly deep dives into customer sentiment through our customer service to help inform improvements in our order management process and all of those different areas of the funnel, essentially, that we can have a positive impact with our customer.
Yeah, I love that, because I don't know why, but you just reminded me of the Devil Wears Prada scene where she's like, oh, florals for spring, how novel. Like,
Yes.
Of course you're going to wear a boot in fall at some point, but I don't know about you. I know you're in Park City. I'm in Vegas. It is still 101 here. So it's so warm. And the last thing I want to put on my feet right now is a boot. But will I wear like a chunky heel now? Like, yeah, I'm there. Like I'll wear, you know what I mean? Like there's also something about like, it's a national brand. And so when you're paying attention to what your customers are searching for at that moment, and you're also taking into account the fact that the US is a huge and also very like geographically diverse country. I love the positioning of fall fashion house versus just like boots, because again, obviously boots for fall, but depending on where you are in the country, you might already be looking at snow boots, you might be looking at rain boots, you might be looking at pumps for a business meeting. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. And another different example, it also allows you, by looking at your customers and looking at it through the lens of data, it also allows you to discover, frankly, challenges that maybe you had no idea existed, right? So when I was at REI, we enlisted a company to do a body of research for us with regard to gender equity in the outdoors. So we wanted to understand both through access of gear and apparel at the right sizes, at the right levels of sort of SKU diversity, to also just people's experiences in the outdoors. And it led us to this really interesting, and it's published, so you can actually find it if you search Force of Nature REI research. Some combination of those terms will point you to it. But we'll show you the results of the research really pointed at a challenge that we maybe hypothesized exists, but it really quantified it. And that was women's experience in the outdoors and them not feeling that it was an equitable experience through either not having the right access to gear and apparel for their needs. If they were, for example, a size 14, then most often they were having to shop in the men's department and they didn't have the right fits and sizes. And there were a whole bunch of issues that came from that, or even literally your time in the outdoors. And this has been a popular topic as of recently, which is bear or man. And that honestly came up in our research years ago. And that was a real factor. So we built a whole program at REI called Force of Nature, which was all around creating equity from a gender perspective in the outdoors, treating the outdoors as the largest level playing field. Now, the naysayers would immediately come at us and say, well, there's no problem in the outdoors when it comes to gender equity. And we'd actually be able to show the research to say, actually, here's what we're looking at. And this is a sample size that was strong enough for us to feel comfortable declaring it to be an issue and comfortable giving ourselves a role in helping to repair the issue.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's kind of wild. Like what year was that? Roughly what year was that research conducted?
That was probably 2017, 2018.
It's crazy that like then 5 years later, like culture
Right.
actually caught up to it, which is wild. So it just kind of goes to show you that if you're paying attention to your customers and you're looking at customer insights, like you can actually get ahead of the trends and already be there. Like that's amazing. I'm going to shift us we do a little game and it'll be fast. Marketers love an A/B test. So we do the A/B test. And this is the least scientific A/B test that you'll ever do in your life. But basically I'm just going to ask you like this one or that one. And some of it'll be personal and some of it'll be marketing related.
I'm here for it.
It'll be fun and a little chaotic, but good. Okay, retargeting ads or abandoned cart emails?
Abandoned cart emails.
They actually get me. Like so few things actually get me. A good abandoned cart email, yeah, it'll get me. Skiing or snowboarding?
Snowboarding, hands down. That may be as obvious for me.
Maybe slightly, but you never know.
Burton, but
Fair enough. Flash sales or loyalty programs?
Loyalty programs.
I think the loyalty program is getting a little bit of a resurgence as of late. I hope, or at least I say that as both a marketer and a consumer, because I'm just like, God, it's so hard, like much harder to like win back customers who have left you and get new customers than it is to keep your customers loyal.
That's why I choose loyalty, because loyalty programs, I think you're right. I think once everybody jumps on the bandwagon of having a loyalty program, it's for obvious reasons, right? You want to be able to nurture those relationships, give them the ability to come back more frequently. And a loyalty program is a great way to do that. But once everybody does it, then it becomes less unique. So what are the unique levers that you can pull on? So that's something that we're always asking ourselves. We've got a really great loyalty program, the VIP program that's been in place for a long time. And we're always looking at, and we'll have some great updates for it in the beginning part of next year as well, ways to continue to energize it, add new value, add new ways that really connect with what the customers are looking for. I love a flash sale, don't get me wrong, but it's not necessarily, I think you can have exclusive flash sale types of events within a loyalty program. So it's maybe a way for me to get both of the things without having to pick both the things. Our biggest tactic that we did at REI with our membership program, which is slightly different than a loyalty program, our most popular membership perk was our garage sale events, which essentially are a flash sale. And so I do think the customer loves those, and making them exclusive for your VIP customers is a really great benefit.
Yeah, it makes VIP is such an overused term. And it's like, make me feel important. Make me feel like you want my dollars more than this other brand that like isn't giving me as much as you do. I love that. Okay. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset. I'm very fair. And so I'm like a night owl. I'm taking this answer a lot of different ways. I'm not a big sun person. I love nighttime. I'm not a morning person, although I have been working on East Coast hours in the mountain time zone, which has made me into a morning person.
That'll do it.
I really respect morning people.
I have had to be a morning person at different times in my career. I would say that is not something that I am generally. So living on the West Coast is it's great for that. Okay, last one. Cooking at home or dining out?
I'm answering this for myself, so I'm going to say dining out, but really, I rarely do that. My husband is the cook at home, which is lovely. So it's basically like I'm dining out every day. So it's great.
Look at that. Split the difference. And you're like, actually, it's kind of like both.
I do love the comforts of home, but I also like the social experience of dining out. So that's why I go dining out.
Yeah, I get that. I love that. Okay, we can get back to work now. We've talked a lot about the importance of brands, like kind of leaning into cultural moments and the ways that you can leverage insights and data to inform those efforts. But when it comes to the flip of it, when it comes to measurement and when it comes to demonstrating return on investment, ROAS, et cetera, when you launch these bigger campaigns and when you kind of take the onus off of short-term results and start looking at mid to long-term success, how do you communicate the long-term value of these initiatives to the rest of leadership and secure buy-in across the organization?
Such a relevant question. I can't picture a conversation I've had with a fellow marketer or frankly brand in the last year that has not been rooted in the same conundrum. There's so much data out there, thankfully, that's starting to aid in this conversation, whether it's Forbes or whether it's Nielsen. They are helping us to quantify the value of strong, long-term brand building efforts all the way back back to EPS value creation or pricing power levers or lifetime value. This obsession over return on investment in the immediate dollar out, $4 in has led to so many brands and retailers over investing in the bottom of the funnel at the cost of long-term sustainable value streams and demand creations that can come from having a differentiated brand. It sounds very simple, but obviously that takes a lot of gut. It takes a lot of persistence. There are so many great brand channels out there, thankfully, that are measurable. So my advice is to build confidence in the organization by starting with those brand channels that are measurable at the earliest onset. So connected TV, great. Even out of home is measurable. You throw a marketing tactic out there to me, I will figure out a way with my team to measure it. And that helps you in those earliest days of starting to scale away from the super bottom funnel heavy strategy into one that's a bit more modern and updated. And frankly, that starts the appetite building across the organization and then hopefully allows that to scale beyond that. Something I've had to learn in my career is also I need to have patience for it as well. And by it's not the actual campaign creation or the investment, it's patience for selling in the confidence. And that takes time and it takes a level of diligence and repeat that is so important to maintain the work and maintain the energy that needs to go against the work.
Totally. It's funny that you say that because I say the same thing about media. I'm like, listen, media is media. It's a set of transmission tools. At some point, if we could all stop talking about digital marketing, that would be awesome because it's just marketing at this point.
It's just marketing.
It's just marketing. The other part to me is when people are like, well, oh, it must be brand spend. So like, for example, the work that I do here, I joined Right Side Up to start our podcast and offline advertising practice. And almost 7 years later, after $250 million invested profitably for brands and podcasts alone, it cracks me up that so many partners reach out to us and they're like, oh, well, you're doing a brand campaign for those people, right? And I'm like, kind of, yes. We are measuring activity at all parts of the funnel. And podcasts, commonly, people have this misconception that it's only a brand channel. And I'm like, no. You can measure, it's digital enough that you can measure the downstream impact of what it's doing, but it's broad enough. And it also does what like a linear or connected television does, where it's like you're creating a trust with the person who is consuming that content. The same way that when my parents watch TV and they're like, did you see this commercial for the blah, blah, blah? I need to try this. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, you definitely do. But I feel like our generation and like Gen X, millennial, Gen Z to an extent, the equivalent for that is the media we consume and the hosts and personalities that we follow, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you're touching on a couple of things. I'm not the type of marketer who doesn't believe in the funnel. There's plenty of people out there who are like, the funnel's dead. And I will actually contrast that and say, it's not dead. It's just changing like everything, right? So I think instead of it dying, it's just people are moving through it way faster. So if I have an investment on TikTok or Meta through Instagram, am I likely to meet a new customer and also have them transact in the same moment because of a post that I'm showing this super cute red Mary Jane flat that's on trend with somebody who looks like somebody that this person would follow, or maybe they actually are following them. Yeah, all of that's happening in 1 second. So they're not meeting me for the first time and transacting with me for the first time in just a couple of clicks and a couple of seconds. So that's still the same process of awareness, consideration, conversion. It's just happening like that. And I would say podcasts, similar, CTV, there's so many ways. We're just consuming so much more from a media perspective. And also I've seen some recent stats about the Gen Z spending power and how that is relating to millennials and Gen Xers. And it's just insane levels of spending. So I just think that like everything, it's changing. And so I think, again, all of the things that we just listed, podcasts, social posts, these are all measurable ways to invest in your brand. The key difference that I always talk about with when it comes to ROI is time. So you have your cert ROI is going to happen in a lot. It's like a click away. It's going to happen much faster. Then I'll call the other piece like really return on engagement to say if it takes longer than one click and it actually is a part of a whole ecosystem where the brand is all of a sudden just showing up everywhere. And my feed is now covering it more often. I'm hearing about it on this podcast. I'm seeing it while I'm watching my favorite show on my laptop. My team, whatever. The team that I'm following is all of a sudden sponsored by them. It's all connected, but it's really helping to accelerate that pace from awareness to conversion. And then how are you really nurturing that relationship so you didn't just spend all that time and money on a one and done customer?
It is so apt that I forget what the exact time of it is, but eMarketer a few years ago came out with a study of like how many hours of consumption we have in a day. And then also just like the amount of time, this is a separate thing that I'm thinking, but the amount of time that we spend shopping and browsing and looking both online, retail, but obviously during COVID with retail kind of out of the equation for a while. The way that we consume content online, I mean, I can only speak for myself in terms of qualitative consumption, but I will tell you that when I see like a super cute bag or shoe or whatever, I'm looking across, I am scouring the internet and I'm like, I wonder where, okay, maybe I'm on Cosmopolitan or I'm on Elle or Vogue or whatever. And I'm like, oh, look at those trends. Oh, actually they linked to this thing. So that's your affiliate program, right? They linked to this thing and oh, actually I just saw that there was this YouTube show, I think it's a podcast, but whatever, it's on YouTube. She was wearing this really cute set of earrings or whatever. So it's just like, it's almost like everything has kind of become shoppable.
Everything is, yeah. I mean, and with visual search now, I don't know about you. I feel like this is an underutilized tool. But I was watching an episode from last season's SNL, and one of the actors was wearing the shirt, and I was like, I need to have that shirt. I don't know what it is. I love it so much. I took a screenshot of it on my phone, went into Google image search, and was able to find it, purchased it, and boom, here we are. And that Emily in Paris, like, might as well be a shoppable TV show because you can just do the same thing with that show all day long. And I think that in its essence, a great example of a culturally relevant TV show that is also probably selling a lot of product.
No question. Like, it's probably this generation Sex in the City in terms of that, like, just you're like, did I even know what a pair of slingback Manolo Blahnik Mary Janes were before Sex in the City? Absolutely not. Did I decide that I needed one and was it my North Star for a couple of years? Absolutely. I'm almost like, thank God it wasn't that immediacy when Sex in the City was on, because it would have been a real situation for me.
I'll save everybody's time on this one. In the last batch of episodes, she's got this iconic look where she's wearing a white fleece jacket and these over thigh-high brown boots with like a Sherpa lining in them. The jacket's Isabel Marant and the boots are Christian Louboutin. I have not purchased either of them, but I've done the research. So there you go.
And that is, thank you for that gift. Also, that sounds like such a look. But that also just goes to show you, like, I bet you anything, that image that is so resonant for you is going to be resonant for other women, resonant for other people that are like, oh my God, wait, I need that vibe, right? Because not everyone's going to, first of all, like go to Isabel Marant or look at it and be like, oh, this is exactly what I want. Maybe it's a white vest situation. I love the idea of using visual search also for those moments. And then it kind of makes you start to think, well, how are marketers investing in visual search as well? There's so much consumption that's happening. Like, people have gotten onto TikTok and have started reapportioning spend. But for a minute there, for maybe 6 to 9 months or so, sometime in like maybe 22, TikTok was kind of under leveraged in favor of Facebook and Instagram because a lot of marketers were just so overinvested in Meta's ecosystem. And it's like, when you can be faster on those platforms or faster on those shows or those moments or whatever it is, there's a media arbitrage that can occur there that like you can't do on TikTok today. It's not the same auctions.
Yep, completely.
I'm going to ask you a future of retail question, but I'm not going to make it crazy. I always laugh at these questions because I'm like, if we had a crystal ball, the last thing that I would be doing right now is like in my office, like beep, boop, boop. I would have figured this out already.
You'd be on the island.
Yeah. I love my job, but I would be on an island somewhere. When you think about the intersection of like innovation and sustainability, and then like this, we kind of got at this a little bit, but like this demand for very personalized experiences with consumers, how do you think about the future of retail when so much of it is so like highly customized and personal to a human's journey and their substantial but limited spending and consumer spend?
Yeah, I think, well, I'm really encouraged by what I'm consistently seeing in all the research that shows Gen Z is having a certain resurgence when it comes to brick and mortar retail. So there's something that's attractive to them. And my hypothesis on it is that they're just so sick of spending so much time on their screens that now in-person shopping is an actual experience for them. Well, who would have thought, right? So I'm encouraged to see that because I personally have never been a believer that retail was dead, that brick and mortar was dead. Even when COVID obviously threw a complete wrench in things, that just flipped everything on its head. But if anything, that just brought more brands and retailers to an omnichannel position, which is the right position. So ultimately, I want to be available to my customers, new and existing, in ways that they want to access me. So whether that's through social social media? Am I selling my products in a curated platform appropriate way on social shopping? Do I have a great website that works lightning fast on a mobile phone and a great app for the loyalists? Yes. Do I have a great retail experience that's within a certain geographic radius of our customers that would benefit from it? Yeah. So I think having the right size footprint across multiple channels allows the customer to engage with you in ways that they choose. And the fact that we are seeing this upcoming generation have a preference for brick and mortar is super encouraging and continues to, I would say, adds that double line benefit to brick and mortar, which is access to the customer from the customer perspective, but also a great brand awareness lever. I can't tell you a more beneficial thing for me as a marketer to do than put a store in a community, because I've got incredible employees who represent the DSW brand better than anybody else can. Our retail field is incredible and they're passionate and they show up every day with the values sort of on their forehead. And that is a huge, huge value add from a customer experience. So I think it's here to stay. I think it's a matter of making those smart investments in the right areas of the business to ensure that you're showing up appropriately for the target.
Yeah, I love that. I think it is kind of fun sometimes to like crap on the things that have worked for marketers before you, or like be like, oh, like my mom shopped here, or my this or my that. And it's like everything comes around. Like when you were just saying that Gen Z is discovering brick and mortar as a shopping experience and just something to do, I feel like millennials are rediscovering it as well, frankly, because when online shopping became kind of like the way and the light, you do lose something in it. And then conversely, when the experience is completely disconnected, it feels bizarre. You're like, well, why isn't that available in the store? Why can't I do this? Or why can't I do that? So it's like that integrated experience provides so much value. And I love the fact that brick and mortar isn't dead and it's also a marketing channel. I don't know why we forget about that sometimes as marketers, that it's an owned channel, an owned channel.
It's a huge marketing vehicle, a huge one. And again, a couple stats that blew my mind for DSW. So when I first joined the organization, I learned that we have a 45-minute dwell time in our stores, which is huge. We have a 35% conversion rate in our stores. So you can contrast that with what a typical conversion rate and dwell time is for an e-commerce business, and you can understand the magnitude of that value there, right? So I think to that point, I can only put my personal experience on when I remember when I first discovered DSW. And I like to go back to the first because it's really where the emotion is kind of the highest. And then you build the reliability of the relationship and you still have it, but not as sexy as it was the first time. When I first walked into a DSW, when I was first making my own money as a young professional and could spend it on shoes and things that I wanted, I was like a kid in a candy store. I would walk in and see the sight line of hundreds and thousands of shoes and just be overwhelmed with choice in a good way. And that's where I can imagine 45 minutes isn't actually that much. I think I would spend like 2 hours in those stores, right? But that's an experience, right? How many other paid advertisements can you say create 45 minutes of time with your brand with a human behind it to really draw the connection between who DSW is and that hand-to-hand experience with the customer? So it's a huge value add.
Well, think about how much you'd have to spend for even 1/45th of that dwell time in any kind of paid medium. It's wild. You've worked and have led marketing for a lot of large consumer-facing brands. What advice do you have for people that are aspiring to do that same thing? And then how do you prepare for the challenges that come with a role like a CMO role?
Well, to the first part of that question, I think the most important thing you can do in your career to ready for a CMO position is focus on your people leadership, period. At this level, I think it's 90% of my job is leading teams. Very, very infrequently am I getting into the work as far as building the strategies for the social media plan or the PR plan or the creative development for this campaign. I certainly will have a role in it, but I have amazing subject matter experts in the building. My job is to make them feel empowered and accountable to deliver on the needs of the business. So I would say honing in on that people leadership skill set, know enough to be dangerous across all of the different functions, of course, that you oversee, because you do need to understand the toggles of all the different levers and the interdependence tendencies, frankly, of them all. But that all comes with time. And then I think readying yourself, again, I'll just go back to the leadership of it all. Time has been my biggest teacher in my career, in addition to just having some really smart people around me to help me just get better and listen. Time has taught me that I actually can be confident that I'm capable of doing this job. As somebody who's had, like many, imposter syndrome and all of those things, those are the things that actually hold you back more than opportunities not presenting themselves, right? So figuring out ways to feel more confident in your own skin and your abilities and your capabilities. If you can figure out some magical secret sauce to unlock that and not require the benefit of time, I think you'd probably be able to be a billionaire pretty quick. But otherwise, be patient, be kind to yourself, learn from the mistakes, and realize that they were in place for a reason. You probably learned more from those things that went sideways than you did from the things that were great and went just as planned, right? So bottle up all of those things and stack them into your cart of learnings and apply them with every twist and turn. Don't expect things to be perfect. Actually expect them to be completely chaotic and figure your way through it. And you're probably going to have more of a healthy mindset and a position, which is frankly the thing I love about it the most is also the thing that's the hardest about it, which is it's a different job every 2 years. Right? Literally marketing 2 years from now we would be having a very different conversation. And we can easily look back and say that that's a true assumption, right? So I think that those are all of the little nuggets of advice I would give to myself maybe 10 years ago if I could have.
I love that so much. I'm probably going to replay that for myself when I'm having a moment. And I would imagine there's still some times where you have to remind yourself, and it's a ever changing thing. Like there is no playbook for how to do this. The more senior I've gotten over the years, the more that has been my realization of like, you guys, I think everybody might be making it up as they go along.
Yeah, there's a level of that. Absolutely. And it's like, thank goodness we have such a great opportunity to connect with other marketers and other brands. And it's like, wait, are you little sanity check, little playbook evaluation? It goes so far.
Yeah. Homework tradesies.
Yes.
It's the best. It's like, what are you doing? Are you seeing this? Like, I can't, part of the reason that I wanted to do this show is that I can't tell you how many times I'll like text other marketers and be like, are you seeing this? Are you doing this thing? And and it's like, it's just a gift to be able to be like, hey, can we talk about this for a minute? Are we all seeing the same thing here? Or do you see this happening? Or have you saw something else in the last 12 months? Or
right.
Yeah. And the last question that I have, we ask everybody, we kind of end on this question. We hear the term growth hack all of the time. Like, how do you hack your way to success or growth with a brand and a medium, etc.? But what I want to know is, what is your favorite growth non-hack? What is your favorite thing or tactic or channel or literally anything that isn't, for want of a better word, a shortcut to success and customer acquisition and growth and brand favorability?
I'm going to go off of knee-jerk reaction where my gut took me as you were asking that question. I am a big believer that internal hype begets external hype. So I would say my number one growth non-hack is to communicate, excite, inform our employees first and foremost across the entire organization as frequently and transparently as possible. I think that's a key to unleashing thousands of human beings that represent your brand with information that could benefit the brand and the business far more than a really clever advertising buy. I think by doing that, you create culture, and culture creates the magic that can create growth.
I can't think of a better way to end it. Thank you for all of your time, for all of your insights. This has been incredible, and just so grateful to you for your time. Thank you again.
Thank you, Krystina. It was super fun.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Growth Talks. We hope you found our discussion insightful and fun. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more valuable content. And if you're excited and ready to start up-leveling your growth strategies and execution, Right Side Up has you covered. Right Side Up is a leading growth marketing agency that is partnered with over 1,000 companies of all stages and sizes to help them meet and exceed their growth goals. With expertise across all growth marketing functions, we can help you evaluate product market fit, develop customer acquisition strategies, navigate executional challenges and staffing gaps, and make pivotal decisions with confidence. And whether you need one individual or a custom-built, full-service team, we'll find you the right A+ talent. Visit us at rightsideup.com to see how we can help you and your company grow.